My name is Varan Karnanantham. I'm a managing partner of iConnect Mortgages and I'm a mortgage agent. And I'm here with CEO of SingleKey, Viler. Viler, please introduce yourself to the guests.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks for having me in the show. My name is Viler, founder and CEO at SingleKey, as you mentioned, and we're the largest tenant screening company in Canada, and we also offer some great risk management solutions like rent guarantees and other tools for landlords to protect themselves, from tenant risk.
And I'm trying to remember how we even connected. We know each other for a very long time, and we had done some business and we had done some introduction. And you guys been great for the people I introduced, and they really use your service. And I have great things from SingleKey, and I personally use you guys as well.
Absolutely, it's been over 5 years since we connected. But yeah, thanks for your business and thanks for your trust. And we've grown a lot since those early days. But the problems that we're solving are also growing, right? So we're kind of growing with that as well.
So let me start with this. What made you to get into opening up a solution for the landlords and starting SingleKey? What triggered you to get into SingleKey?
It's interesting because at the time, before SingleKey, I spent about 5 years working at the banks, primarily in risk management. So I was working at TD Bank and Capital One and, in retail credit risk. And we have products at the bank. Like, for example, you're familiar with this.
Yeah, I'm a banker, so I'm a former banker, retail banker.
And especially given in the mortgage space, mortgage insurance products, right? The way they work is that, if the borrower ends up, hurt or going on disability or losing their job or source of income, there's insurance product out there that will pay your mortgage for, let's say, 6 to 9 months to give you time to get back on your feet, get a new source of income, and start paying back your mortgage so you don't risk losing your house. So we thought, hey, what if we have something similar to that, but we applied to real estate investments? Because we saw at the bank a lot of folks coming, away from mortgages to buying rental properties. And for a rental property, you're counting on the rental income to pay the mortgage, right? Pay the property costs. And at the time, there was nothing like that in the market. We looked around, we were surprised, in fact, that there was no such thing as like a rent guarantee that covers, losses if tenants stop paying rent, basically. And we thought that was a big opportunity because, especially when you look at most landlords, probably most of your clients, they're not like these big kind of like 200 door, 500 door, kind of like property managers.
Under 5.
Exactly, right? 1 to 5. Most people, I think we did the math, 2.5, 2.8 on average across Canada. So if you've only got 2 properties and one of your tenants not paying the rent, there goes half your cash flow, right? So you have like a risk, your risk is very concentrated and you have a cash flow problem. Especially now, given it takes 12 months to go through the legal process of removing that tenant once they stop paying the rent, you end up, going out $50,000, $60,000 in potential lost rental income. That's a lot of money for a small investor to kind of, be able to kind of float. So we thought, hey, why don't we build a simple insurance product to cover, these types of losses in the rare event that when this does happen. We know most tenants are pretty safe, but we always have that small percentage, right? That sometimes either they don't want to pay or they can't pay because something happened in their life. And then next thing you know, you're out 12 months of rent. You're in a really difficult difficult cash flow position. You're at risk of losing your home. And we saw this happen during COVID when we had a lot of like folks, basically we had those eviction bans in every province. We had a lot of tenants unpaid because of that. It became all of a sudden, a lot of real estate investors became cognizant of how risky this business can be if you're not well prepared for it. And I think it gave us a conviction that we needed to really kind of push forward and understand that we were solving a real problem here. And this is something we needed to really scale out there and get in front of everybody. And
you brought a couple of things because when we qualify for a mortgage, it's important. Most of the clients are qualified with the rental income. So if you kind of take that out of the equation, how are you going to manage a mortgage payment, right? So that's one of the reasons. So it's the same thing with the insurance as well. Like if one of the spouses is not around, how are you going to keep up the mortgage payment?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, totally. And affordability, ability to pay, those are all key kind of like qualification criteria for, I actually have this analogy. I tell everybody, I'm like, as a homeowner, when you're giving somebody, signing somebody on a lease, you're kind of giving them credit, right? Given that if they don't pay, they could potentially kind of accumulate up to, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 of rent arrears.
Absolutely.
It's no different than you giving them a $50,000 line of credit. And the bank is going to ask a lot of questions. They're going to ask, look at your affordability, look at your credit score, right, to make sure that you can afford to pay those monthly payments, and pricing the risk, right? So that's basically kind of what we've done.
How did you manage the mitigate the risk during the COVID time? Like people are not purposely not paying, right? So how did SingleKey mitigate the risk?
Yeah, I mean, COVID was a scary period for us because we were like less than a year in business at the time, right? And that was both good and bad, right? it was kind of like the worst case scenario if you think about it, right? Because you have, you've got eviction bans in every province. If tenants don't pay, they don't get, evicted.
Exactly.
So they don't have strong incentive to pay. You have people leaving the cities, the rents are coming down, vacancies flying up. It was real, as a landlord, that's kind of the worst case scenario, right?
Yeah.
And for us as a company, that's basically guaranteeing rent. That was also kind of like the worst thing that could potentially happen in terms of kind of a global macroeconomic event. So the way we thought about it is that, hey, what is the intention of this program, or what is it underwriting? And it's underwriting tenant risk.
Yeah.
What it's not underwriting is, these kind of like basically the government changing rules and telling you that, basically all of a sudden now you can't evict tenants because they stop paying the rent. So what we decided to do is to basically kind of work with our clients, the ones that were tenants to default, to say that, hey, look, what we're going to do is basically pause the program until the eviction bans are lifted, and I can take this back to court. As soon as the courts open back up and I'm actually able to file for eviction, we will start paying you. Because at the time, even when you get back to court, there was a backlog of 60,000 cases.
Yeah.
It would still take 6 months at least to get a hearing.
Yeah.
So we would cover the rent for that from when we filed for eviction all the way until kind of the case was resolved. And we helped a lot of people during that period by doing that. So, we're able to kind of mitigate it by the fact that, we kind of put a pause on it during the court eviction bans, which luckily they were only like 6 months at a time, like in 2020, 2021, and then they would open them back up. And then we would resume the program as soon as, we were able to actually take legal action and do something about it and mitigate our losses, right? And lastly, I think the fact that we were just starting, we had a small portfolio, but it also meant that we had small exposure. We didn't have like a massive...
It's a growing stage.
Exactly right. So like the risk wasn't all there. And we had competitors like our Neighborly, for example, if you remember them, they went out of business during that period because of that, because they were a couple of years ahead of us. They were a bit bigger. Pricing was a bit smaller. So like they didn't have the ability to take on as many losses. And they ended up kind of shutting down the program. And we acquired them a year later, basically. But, we were profitable the entire time. We were able to kind of manage the risk and do so at a relatively affordable rate of only 5% of the monthly rent for the rent guarantee, and get through that tough period and support a lot of people through it. Now we're a lot bigger. We have thousands of policies on this program. We take a lot more steps to be able to kind of like, forecast and kind of like mitigate these types of risks from happening in the future.
You learn from the experience.
Yeah, well, absolutely, right? Because we started in the worst case possible. Yeah. So the fact that we got through that, I think, gives us a lot of confidence that we're going to be able to kind of handle these types of shocks a lot more rigorously. And we count on our partners. We have reinsurance partners that basically kind of help us extend our capacity to be able to underwrite more risk. And then lastly, people ask me all the time, they're like, what do you think the risk is going to be the next, couple of years? Like this year, next year, could something like that happen again? I think right now, a lot of landlords are looking at a potential recession, and that's scaring a lot of people. There's
the job losses.
Well, they're seeing the layoffs, the job losses. They're like, I know that if my tenant is basically paycheck to paycheck, if they lose their job, they're not going to be able to pay my rent, right? Yeah. Then what am I going to do? So I think, during these times, we're getting a lot of interest from a lot of clients for that reason. They're like, better safe than sorry. Rents are already high. I feel comfortable paying 5% to SingleKey to guarantee my rent. That way I don't have to worry if my tenant loses their job and I can't pay it.
So I have another interesting question. Are you seeing any landlords are losing their houses because they can't keep up the payment? And I have clients calling me from my contact, my realtors.
Yeah.
My landlord haven't paid. I have a client right now. My landlord haven't paid the mortgage for 6 months, and bailiff came and gave the court order. I don't have place to go. Like,
for sure.
What can I buy this house out? What are the options? Like, how are you managing that?
Yeah, and actually, that's a good question. This happened a lot during COVID when, we had much higher default rates.
But at the time, you don't need to pay a mortgage.
There was. You're right. So there was some help along the way, which was help. But the risk was a lot higher as well. It happens all the time, Brad. It really depends on kind of like what it depends on kind of what your financial situation is as a
landlord,
as a landlord or as a real estate investor. Typically, I would say look, like if you're 50, 100, 200 units plus, this risk becomes lesser and lesser because law of averages kicks in. That 2-3 maybe percent of your rent is going to go bad, but it's not going to put you out of business, right? It's just cost of doing business, part of your P&L, right? But if you're a small landlord like most Canadians and you've got 2 or 3 properties or maybe just one, then you're at real risk. And that's exactly what this program is for, is to make sure that your rent is guaranteed so you can basically secure the rental income stream and not risk losing your house. And we've seen that happen quite often. Yeah.
And also I'm seeing the landlords are not keeping up the mortgage payment because of the high mortgage payment. They're actually putting the tenants on risk as well. Like, have you run into a situation like that? Like you have a guaranteed tenant,
Yep.
but the landlord couldn't keep up the mortgage, and now they're in risk of losing the place where they've been living because the house is under power of sale.
You're right, and especially given kind of how sharp of a rise, the interest rates were, like probably one of the fastest growth in interest rates that we've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people, especially if they weren't on variable payments or if they got hit by a fast renewal, their monthly mortgages doubled, right?
Absolutely.
And your rent isn't going to cover that, right? So if you don't have the finances in place to be able, or you have some cash or some assets aside to be able to cover those payments, you're going to be in trouble. It's a tough time to be a landlord. Yeah.
And also now, who's at fault, landlord or the tenant, right? Like if you cannot keep up the payment.
It's a good question. We as far as the rent guarantee is concerned, I think. I don't think it affects us in that sense because
it does affect your business, but it's like there's a big, like I have a tenants calling me
right.
and asking me, can you look at how much of a mortgage this person has? Can I take this house? They're doing the due diligence on the landlord.
That's amazing, yeah.
Yeah,
can they afford to pay the mortgage?
Can they afford to make the mortgage? Yeah. Like how? Who's a lender? Like, are they on a private mortgage?
No way.
Yeah, so tenants are like a good tenants. They're worried about like moving into the family.
That's interesting.
And the banks, they don't want the banks to come and shut down the house.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. So I'm seeing that. Like maybe it's something interesting for you guys to look into.
Yeah. What I can tell you is from the RTA perspective, tenants have rights to stay there even if the house gets foreclosed or gets sold to another. So if they can't keep up the payments, they have to sell the property. Technically, they don't have to leave. The lease just gets transferred on or sent to the new owner. And so, right, unless the new owner intends to
doesn't move in as a principal home. That's
exactly right. So the tenant's safe. Yeah.
So, the $1 million question is when I work with a lot of investors, and one of the biggest fear for the investors to get into the investment properties or rental market is, I don't want to manage the tenants. Then I talk about, there are companies like SingleKey, they can do a rental guarantee. This is not possible. So, can you kind of walk us through how you kind of manage in the back end operation, your back end securitization or like security? I think that's the biggest fear for people to even believe SingleKey. Like, is it even true?
I'm happy you asked that question because I'm thinking at myself, 5 years ago when we started this business and we were asking the same question, is this even possible? Can we even pull this off, right? Now, look, as underwriters, there are some rules and principles you need to follow where like big numbers provide safety, right? This is basically a risk pooling exercise. The idea is that, look, if you look at the eviction cases across Canada, or in Ontario at least, it's about a 5%. So 1 in 20 leases end in an eviction case at the LTB. Now, that's the general population. What if you do a really good job of screening those tenants up front? So you do proper due diligence, you screen them properly, you get your credit information, get your income information, you approve them well, right? Chances are you can get that 5% down to closer to 2% or less, right? So that's kind of like our idea is that, and that's part of the reason why we built our tenant screening tool is that for us to be able to manage the risk on the portfolio, we couldn't just let anybody jump on it. We have to figure out a way to kind of screen and manage risk and basically, segment the population of tenants that we approved. And I'm happy to say that we're still able to approve about 80% of the tenants out there, but it's that 80-20 rule. It's usually the 20% that you don't approve that cause 80% of the headaches. 80% headache, yeah. So if you can identify those folks and keep them off the book, you can then manage risk very effectively at a very affordable price point, right? So the nice thing about us is that, once you're able to pool the risk where you've got thousands of leases now paying that 5% premium to the program, all we have to do is keep the losses below that, and basically the claims that we're paying on a monthly basis below the 5% number, and we're profitable and we're able to keep kind of supporting the book. And the landlords love it because, it is sometimes the luck of the draw, right? You don't know if that tenant, even if you did all the screening that you needed to do, all the due diligence up front, life happens. People lose their jobs. People get, get sick, or they have health issues. Maybe they have a breakup or divorce, puts them in a very difficult financial position. And we see this happen all the time. So, oftentimes we have sometimes just as many defaults or delinquencies on year 2 or 3 of the lease as we do on year 1, right? Okay. And year 1, you're expecting folks that want to be, I'd say there's two reasons for that basically people don't pay. One is they don't want to.
They're professional tenants.
Professional tenants, they're there to basically take advantage, and they know the loopholes. So that's a smaller, and I'd say we do a really good job of keeping those guys away because a lot of times we can identify them up front and take them off our book. But if they're going to stop paying, they're going to stop paying on year 1.
Yeah.
Then you have the people that are life circumstances, right? Something happened that caused them to pay, and it's more of an affordability issue or financing issue. And we try to work really hard with those folks. And there are support, there's rent banks and other ways that can help support or payment plans you can put them on to kind of help them get them out of that kind of, difficult period. But that can happen anytime. And as a landlord, it's a luck of the draw, which the idea is that, hey, look, if everybody chips into this program, we pool the risk together, and if you get unlucky and you get that tenant that isn't able to pay, then we step in and cover the losses through the rent guarantee for up to 12 months of lost rent, up to $60,000, $5K a month. We cover damages to the property for up to $10,000. We even cover the legal fees for up to $1,500 or $2,000 for the property, so that you get your rent check no matter what. And then if there's any problems with the tenant, we'll step in to support you and resolve the situation.
What's the conversion rate from a tenant screening to rent guarantee?
I'd say it's probably somewhere close to about 10%.
About 10%.
Yeah. Our rent guarantee approval criteria, as you know, is very black and white, very transparent. It's not, it's basically, hey, as long as you can afford to be there, we'll approve you, right?
Yeah.
We do a credit check. Don't even look at the credit score. We don't think it's as predictive of default. But we're looking for red flags like bankruptcies, prior evictions, massive judgments, or for example, let's say if you've been sent to collections or by another property manager, and we're looking at like your affordability. Is your rent to income ratio below 45%, meaning you're not spending more than half your rent, gross pre-tax household income on rent? And if you meet those criteria, you automatically get pre-approved. So when you run a credit check, there will be a pre-approval for the rent guarantee button right there. So anybody that sees that can actually sign up their tenant for the rent guarantee.
How are you seeing the qualification right now? Because the rent has gone up.
Prior to today's like rent, very, very expensive rental market, most lenders would say that you want your tenant to have about a 30% rent income ratio, right? So they should be spending more than 30% of their, or like
this has gone up significantly.
Exactly, a third of like their kind of like household income on rent. But like if you look at the average rents in Toronto, right, $2,500 for one bedroom, $3,000 sometimes, right, and your average kind of like individual, let's say you're a young adult, you just got your first or second job, you're probably making $70,000. That's what, $6,000 a month.
Yeah. That's gross income.
That's gross income, exactly, before paying taxes and cost, living expense, and everything else. So you're already at 50%, right? So the days of the 30% rent to income ratio are gone, especially in
what's the standard now? Like what are you guys seeing on average?
Well, we're seeing a lot of 40, 45. I think we actually launched an article on this, I think, Karen, previously, where we looked at our numbers across the country, and we actually published them province by province, city by city, to show you where the affordability challenges are the hardest. And these are real numbers that we're seeing on a monthly basis from thousands of applications coming in.
Yep.
What is the average rent income ratio in Toronto? What is it in Vancouver, in Montreal, and everywhere else? And we're seeing them inch above 40%, right? And these are kind of overall numbers.
That's pretty scary.
It's very scary, especially considering that most people actually apply as couples, or they're moving together with a partner or spouse. And for folks that are living on their own, it becomes even more difficult, right? So that's why I think we're seeing a lot of young people living at home with their parents, or delaying moving out, unless they have the financial means to do so. So I think that's the biggest part, or the biggest challenge now for renters is that affordability piece.
Yeah. I think same with the mortgages as well, right?
I'd say it's even tougher on the mortgage side, right? And we were talking
because the qualifying rates.
Well, not just that, but we were talking about this where now on our typical property, you're paying almost double in mortgage payments than you would on rent, right? Yeah. So especially if we're talking about condos downtown Toronto, $1 million condo is going to cost you $6,000 a month to service the mortgage, but you can rent for $3,000 a month. Why
would you want to?
Yeah. So it's even tougher. I think it's even tougher for real estate investors to make money in that market.
Is there a number of properties you insure for one person, or there's no limit?
As a real estate investor, you've got 1, 5, 10 properties. We'll guarantee them all on a lease by lease basis. And on a per lease, you can have multiple applicants. You can have a couple. You can have one person. You can have 5 people. It doesn't really matter. What we'll do is we'll basically pool the income together. Look at the household income. Look at the rent. If that meets the criteria, 45% of the income, you're in.
Can you talk how is the screening program weeding out the bad tenants out?
Absolutely.
Or professional tenants out?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and you know what, Brett, this is a big reason why, you mentioned earlier, like this, the rent guarantee almost sounds too good to be true. The reason is we're able to make it
because you have this program in place.
Exactly, right. To really reduce the risk up front as much as possible.
This is your risk mitigation tool probably, right?
Exactly, right. And just the same way you apply for a loan at the bank or a mortgage, you're going to go through due diligence process to get approved for it.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing. They're trying to really reduce their risk and reduce the default rate. So, it was born out of that. We came up with the idea for the rent guarantee first, and then very quickly realized, we need a way to kind of screen tenants, right? And then what's important? Well, we need to see credit, we need to see income, employment, references, all the kind of standard practices that landlords do. And we started out by just doing those basics initially. we started by automating it because we're getting hundreds a day. And in the beginning, it was me with, doing them by hand, one at a time.
Picking up the phone?
I'd talk to the phone, run the report.
This was about 5 years back?
5 years back when we first started, right? I'd take the PDF and I'd stick a SingleKey logo on it and sell it to the customer, send it to them via email. Yeah. That was our first product.
Yeah.
Right? And now it's evolved a lot since then because we went from doing, a couple of reports a day to hundreds a day, right?
Yeah.
So now it's fully automated, but also what we've done is we actually bring in a lot of third-party data sources to kind of like better inform the decision. So our goal here is to still make it very easy, user-friendly, understandable for just the average kind of like a landlord and realtor. But also like make sure that we look at every single potential data source that could lead us to a potential red flag, right? So we're looking at income. We actually have some AI tools now that are actually scanning the PDF to tell you if
it's altered or not.
Yeah, if it was altered or not, exactly, because it happens all the time. People in a tough rental market, they're having trouble getting to that affordability metric. They'll go in their pay stub and just change the income. You want to know if they did that, right? So we're analyzing those documents.
Thanks to AI, eh?
Exactly. We're analyzing those documents. We're looking for, like the AI is looking for things like, hey, did the fonts change? The layouts changed? Is there any weird metadata on the file itself that we should be aware of? And they can give you a pretty good answer. And most of the folks who are doing these types of edits are not professional cyber.
So they get caught easily.
Yeah, they get caught easily in most cases, right? So it's an effective tool to kind of like to deter fraud risk. And then similar to that, we're looking at things like, can we pull alternative income data so we can confirm kind of that they work there? We're looking at LinkedIn profiles automatically. So like we have APIs that will, based on your name and location, it'll pull your LinkedIn profile. It'll make sure that the income there, the employer there matches what's on your Equifax report, matches what's on your rental application, matches what's on your pay stub. So we're doing a lot of these cross references kind of in the background, and then just letting you know if something's wrong, right? Similar idea for ID verification, especially now that a lot of rental units are being rented remotely. If you haven't met the tenant in person, how do you know who's filling out the report?
Oh, we dealt with it.
Yeah.
You and I.
Well, exactly, right? Yeah.
I know how that works. Yeah.
So one easy solution is basically now at the end of the rental application, we make you take a selfie, you show your ID, we'll match the faces, cross-reference, make sure the ID is valid. It's
so that's also technology driven.
It's completely automated, right? So that's how, we're kind of like leveling up the game there by just adding in a lot of this kind of automation to this. And I'm sure we've seen a lot of similar developments on the mortgage side, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of tools out there that help kind of really reduce risk.
Fraud. Yeah.
So that's our that's really kind of our value prop.
Are you guys pulling up the landlord and tenant board? Any past hearings or any of those things?
That's something that we're doing now, and we're talking to different kind of providers to get more sources in. Like some of the new ones, like Open Room, we're kind of looking to API into that kind of that tool so we can pull in some of their.
Is it available right now? It's something you guys are working on.
It is available right now from some sources, so we can pull in like data from Canly, for example. That's publicly available, so we can search to see if the tenant's name shows up on Canly. And if that's the case, we'll pull in the judgment and show it on the report. But we're also looking for other data sources because Canly is not complete. It's got about 10 or 20,000 records that are actually kind of readable and that have people's names on it. But there's a ton more out there that it's not easily aggregated.
Yeah.
So we're constantly looking for vendors and kind of like legal court judgment providers to API that information so that if the tenant's applicant's name shows up on any of those databases, we pull in a record and display it to the landlord. But I think that's really kind of the future, and I think it's an interesting space, right? Because there's a kind of like balance of like how long should that record exist? After 5 years, is it important anymore?
Yeah.
Right, because you want to give people a second chance too. But at the same time, if you just evicted somebody because they didn't pay you 12 months of rent and they start applying to my rental, I want to know about it. Right?
Yeah,
because
absolutely. You want to know what the history is.
Exactly. So we got to find the balance here to make this work.
Yeah. So Viler, you guys are working on the internship credit bureau. Like, tell us more about like why it's important and how you guys are doing it and how it's going to mitigate the risk for the landlords and how it's going to help the tenants who's moving to Canada, because immigration is everything right now in Toronto.
Absolutely. And as you said, right, like we've done a ton of upgrades to our tenant screening tool. Just before the international credit check, we actually launched a dual bureau. So now we plug to both Equifax and TransUnion.
Oh, you get both, okay.
To get the full picture. Very important because like we noticed that some collection agencies only reported one out of the other.
Yeah.
So if you just run one, you might get a very different credit score to the other one, depending on what was reported.
Correct. I see that all the time.
Exactly.
2 different scores, 2 different reports.
Exactly. And we're one of the first to make this easily accessible to small landlords because typically you'd only go to one or the other and kind of potentially miss some really important information. The international credit check was another big upgrade to our tenant screening tool. And to your point, yes, we have a huge number of kind of new arrivals to Canada coming in. And, we dealt with those. Basically, we'd have landlords call us and say, hey, I've got somebody that's been here for 2 months. Can I run a credit check on them? We would turn them away. We would say, sorry, they won't have Canadian credit yet. It'll take about 6 months for that to build. Exactly, right? So we couldn't help or service those customers. Now, these tenants were having a real difficult time. So they were getting here. The biggest challenge they had, amongst everything else of like shifting your life from one country to the other was, I need a roof over my head. I need to get approved.
How do you get there?
How do I get there, right? Especially if I don't have anybody in the ground to help me kind of get settled and get started. And the challenge that we're having is that when they come here and they've got no credit history, sometimes no job yet, right? They need time to find one. They basically don't match the checklist that landlords are looking for, and they have a binary approach. Hey, do you have credit? Do you have a job? Do you have references? Do you have
none of the above?
Exactly. and so the answer is no. Sorry, right? Or you're gonna have to pay 12 months rent up front to the landlord to get the property, which isn't legal, but a lot of them do that because they need
to find a place to.
And that's not very affordable either, right? Because nobody's got $40,000-$50,000 to kind of pay for a lease up front just in their bank account.
So you're actually giving a line of credit to the landlord.
Pretty much.
Not instead of landlord is giving a line
exactly. Of credit. And this is more common. And this is what we learn from interviewing these clients, right? And they're like, yes, it's very difficult. We're kind of in the new market. We don't know what's going on. There's a lot of scams out there. And also we're having a very hard time getting approved because I don't have credit and they always ask for it. And how do I... And oftentimes we have to offer 6 to 12 months up front to be able to get approved, right?
Imagine you give the money to the landlord and the landlord didn't pay a mortgage and you out of the house.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. And you know what? And unfortunately, like we've seen some of these applicants or folks kind of like get taken advantage of, right? Because like they're not familiar with the market. They don't know where to look. Yeah. So, some bad actors are out there doing this kind of stuff. So our thought was, what can we do to help these folks get approved, right? And two ways we can do that. One, let's help them bring their credit from back home to Canada so that, and not just bring it home to Canada, but we'll take that report, let's say from, Philippines or Nigeria or India or Australia, and we'll translate it in Canadian dollars, first of all. So we have to basically completely reformat because it looks completely different everywhere else in the world from what you're familiar with, and, from a standard Equifax or translated report here. So we had to translate it and we had to make it in a format that's easy for the landlord here to understand. And for that, we'll work with our partners at Nova Credit to be able to produce that report. And that way, hey, if you can see that this person has a great kind of like payment history back home, they got good credit, they've got good debt servicing or not a lot of debt, you just feel a lot more comfortable. You have more data than you had before. We even actually now are working on something to go even one step beyond that. What we're doing is we're repurposing our rent guarantee risk management tool to offer what's called a tenant passport, where basically SingleKey will act as a guarantor for you as a newcomer, so that if you don't pay or you damage your property or
you take a responsibility.
We take responsibility to cover all those costs, right? And the way we will do that because we can now run the credit, get some income information, be able to kind of like...
So you do your own risk mitigation on the tenant.
Exactly. We do our own risk mitigation on the tenant. We can kind of like price and kind of like understand that risk a bit better and feel comfortable, basically underwriting these folks for less than 1 month's rent, which is a way more affordable option than having to pay 12 months rent.
Okay.
Right?
So they pay SingleKey 1 month rent.
Exactly. And then we basically use that fee to cover claims if they happen. And it's early days. We're planning to kind of launch this just in time for back to school, in August and September.
So it's not out there. So
we've got about 1,500 people on our waiting list. For
1,500 people on the waiting list.
Yeah. So it's a very, very popular
product.
And for that reason that you said, right, that a lot of these folks are having a really hard time getting approved and looking for any way to get some help. And as far as I can see, we're the only company really doing something about this. And the end game is basically, putting that underwriter credit risk hat on is, the approval and the approval process for housing shouldn't be binary. It shouldn't be like, oh, you hit the checklist or you don't. No, it should be basically, what is the risk for this applicant individually? Can we price that risk and kind of allow them to, similar to when you go to the bank and hey, if you have a lower credit score,
you have a high rate.
Yeah, you get a higher rate to cover the risk, but you still get approved for.
It's a risk-based pricing.
Exactly, risk-based pricing, exactly. So that's kind of where we're going with this, and we want to become kind of that risk management layer between the housing providers and the residents.
So let me answer this, so there's a lot of talks about immigration and housing crisis, and what you said, dealing with international clients and credit bureaus, you're probably in the forefront of dealing with them. Do you think there's a housing crisis? You guys are seeing the housing crisis here?
Well, I mean, it's not a new thing, right? I think where we saw like a big change in the housing market, especially in some of the the hotter markets that we're in, like the GTA and some of Vancouver, et cetera. I think there was a bit of a triple whammy. So I think after COVID, when schools opened back up, students can come back to school. A lot of them left their homes, started moving in town, right? So that was a big influx of demand, right? They also basically opened up the border so immigrants could come in as well.
It's open up again.
Yeah, and then so that's part number 2. And then the third kind of demand force was a lot of folks that had moved out of the city during COVID now were coming back to work, right? So now you had a triple whammy of kind of demand putting pressure on the market. And we've never built more than 250,000 units.
So it's still the same case? Like it's still the demand is high?
I think that was the big shock. And that's what really kind of like boosted prices 20% in the rental markets, I think maybe about a year ago. Yeah. Now it's kind of like, it's a bit more balanced in that sense. We're seeing kind of prices kind of softening a little bit. I think it's more indication of the economy, but we're still in a 0%, zero vacancy market, right? So it's still a very good.
It moves quickly.
Yep. And I think it's going to be a matter of basically population growth, of being able to add new supply to the market. Can people work remotely? Can they have the flexibility to not have to be downtown where the market is?
That's also changing too, right? A lot of companies, they want at least 2 to 3 working days in.
Some of them do. We try to do the same as well, but we also have to kind of basically be cognizant of the needs of the employees. And if there is the housing downtown and you can't really force people to kind of be somewhere where they can't afford to live, right? So, I think that's kind of like the counter forces to that rising demand, which is great. Yeah.
So give us some stories you went through over the last 5-6 years, like something you can never get over your head over.
Well, I mean, we have a lot of interesting stories, I think, when it comes to like landlord and tenant issues, right? Because we're
you're the middleman.
Exactly, right? So we hear everything,
yeah.
Right? And we're going through thousands of these on a monthly basis. Some that stand out to me, and this is something that actually doesn't only happen once for us, but one of our partners and part of SingleKey, she had a tenant in her basement, and one night she shows up at home. It's later in the evening after work, right? And she finds out that the police has raided her home, right? So they're in the bottom unit or in the lower level unit. They've broken down the door. They have basically raided the property. Because the tenant downstairs was doing something illegal, and
she had no idea.
She had no idea, right? And then when she walked in, she said there was all kinds of weird things in there, like money, cash counters, and apparently there's some sort of money. I don't know what the problem was. Long story short, though, this tenant ends up getting arrested, and the problem is that she can't meet him in person to serve him papers to basically a notice of eviction or an L1 for eviction hearing. So now she's kind of stuck where she has like a property that's been broken into by the police that she has to pay for. She can't evict the tenant because she can't serve papers to him, and she can't start the legal process until he's released.
He's released. He's able if he's released.
So, and he's obviously not paying rent, So that was definitely kind of like a one of a kind kind of experience, right? But we have stuff like this happens all the time, and I would say for the most cases we're able to, if it's a pretty common case where tenant hasn't paid, we'll go through the legal process like we do every month. And we're by the way, we're doing dozens of these every month, right? So we're getting
get used to it. You're prone to it now.
We've got a good process in place. We've got some good people. We got some great paralegals that we work with, and our internal team, because it's mainly of past realtors or property managers, so they know the process. And
so you have in-house. Paralegals.
We not paralegals in-house, but a lot of the folks who work in our rent guarantee team have a background either in real estate or property management. So they're used to dealing with these types of tenancy issues in the past. But yeah, it's once in a while you do get some of these cases.
Crazy stories.
Absolutely. You mentioned before, tenants renting a place, not paying rent, but then Airbnb it.
Yeah.
You get people starting businesses out of their homes and not paying rent and completely destroying the property. We've seen it all, right? So, the good news is that it doesn't. If you look at the numbers overall, it's a small percentage of these troublesome tenants that cause a lot of the noise that you hear in the market.
The 80-20 rule.
Exactly. but at the same time, that's what we're here for, is to basically, cover that low risk that exists in the market. But if it happens to you, it's a huge headache that you don't know how to deal with. And keep in mind that most of the folks we're dealing with, they're not professional property managers. Yeah. They don't have a paralegal team. They don't have a superintendent to go and knock on the door. They don't have a property manager background. They don't know the rules and how to deal with the courts and to deal. So that's what we're here for. We're kind of like a back office risk management shop.
Yeah.
That if things are going great, you won't hear from us. But the second they go wrong and tenant stuff, we're here to support you and to kind of take away that risk. And we're hoping that by doing this, we can encourage more landlords to put their units on the market. We have calls from people that are like, hey, look, I've had this basement empty for 2 years or apartment. I moved out of my condo, didn't want to sell it because it's got some home equity. Yeah. But I'm so nervous to release it.
Find a tenant.
Yeah, because I've heard all the horror stories from
that's the biggest fear for people who
Exactly. So by being on the rent guarantee with SingleKey, we're almost thinking of think of ours as like training wheels, right? If it's your first time doing it, you're scared. This is an easy way to get into the market and not have to not have to basically.
Someone's holding your hands, pretty much.
Exactly.
So, Viler, you guys have come a long way since we met over the 5 years. New products, grown a lot. Where do you see your company in 5 years from now?
Yeah, that's a good question, Brad. I mean, and I think our bread and butter is really still, our focus is taking the risk out of renting for housing providers, because that's, what we're well known for. That's where a lot of our traction is as a business. And I think eventually we're slowly moving towards becoming more of like a full service lead to lease platform where we can help you from basically marketing your listing to booking viewings and obviously qualifying and screening tenants, to signing your lease, collecting rent, and then some lead property management, and automate as much of that as possible and reduce the risk of anything going wrong as much as possible. One really interesting product that we're actually launching next month is our first in Canada free e-leasing tool, where as soon as you screen the tenant, you can hit a button, we'll take all the information that we have on the tenant, and we'll autofill the entire tenant lease agreement. We'll even offer up some paralegal drafted addendums that you can attach to the lease to protect you, and you can send it over for free e-signatures to the tenant. So all in one click, less than 10 or 15 seconds, you can have a lease drafted and sent over and feel good about it. And then we can even ask the tenant to get renter's insurance along the way as you're kind of logging in to sign the lease. So that's kind of what's happening on the landlord side. It's really kind of trying to simplify the entire process. On the tenant side, as you mentioned, the big challenge there is, how do I get approved, right? I need to get approved. It's a very competitive rental market. I need to make sure that I'm putting together a really kind of good, strong renter CV, which has my credit, my income, my employment info, references. So, so I can have a good shot at kind of getting approved every time I apply to a landlord. So that's what we've done with our tenant passport and our rental application, shareable rental application that you can run once and share as many times as you like. I'm very excited about the guarantor service, or the tenant passport, where SingleKey can become your guarantor, especially if you're new to Canada, especially if you're a student, or maybe you're not a AAA tenant, you have lower credit or no credit. We can help you kind of get approved without having to really kind of spring 6 months up front, which is great.
What's your takes on the new government came up with? Now the rental can be reported on the credit bureau.
Yeah, we think that's a great idea. It's interesting because we've been doing this for a while now through our rent collection tool. If you pay rent through,
you guys report to the credit bureau.
We plug into Equifax, because we have a relationship with them. We report those rent payments. As long as you use our rent collection tool, those rent.
So you guys do a rent collection tool as well. That's another service.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And that's a free product that you get with a rent guarantee.
So how that works, Viler?
It's totally up to you as a landlord. You can choose to collect your own rent, or you can use a free rent collection tool. It's basically an EFT PAD, so pre-authorized debit. You say, okay, rent is $2,000 a month starting July 1st. Send the invite to the tenant. Tenant just puts in the bank account information or logs into their bank and selects the checking account. And then we pull that amount on the first of every month and send it to the landlord. It takes about 3 or 4 days for it to process, and then report the payments to the bureau. Very simple product, kind of like.
So you guys are already ahead of the game.
Oh yeah, we've been doing this. We've had this for a couple of years now, and it's a pretty common practice. We're even seeing kind of like other companies that are offering tenants the ability to kind of just log in and show their payment on their transaction record or transaction history, and just report it. Hey, look, I paid my rent for July 1st, for September 1st, whenever, and build your credit as you go. I think there's 2 benefits. First, it helps them build their credit, which is great, especially renters need that, because they need to basically build up their history to get ready for home ownership and get to the next level, and make it easy for them to also, next time they move, to get approved much, much faster. But secondly, it incentivizes them to pay their rent on time, which is, I think, something that landlords love as well, right? Because they're not constantly having to chase their tenants to pay their rent. So I see that as a big win-win, and I think it's a great idea and great initiative.
I think it's a great thing, because even in mortgage application, we had to get the client's 12 months bank statement to show, did you pay the rent on time? This is already automated, so you don't need to go through the process, and this is all streamlined. It's on the Equifax. When you pull your credit bureau, you see it. And I'm glad you're saying that, because what we're doing next now is we actually have another product that we're working on with Equifax called Credit Health. And what this is now is that basically it's a credit monitoring tool. So you log into SingleKey, you set your rent payments to automatically pay on a monthly basis on the first of the month. We take those payments, report to the bureau, and then we can show you how your credit score is changing from month to month. So you can. So this is helping to build the credit.
To help build your credit as a renter, right? So I think it's a great value add for renters to boost their credit, and also a lot of the folks that we talked about, students, no credit, new to Canada, that need to establish credit quickly. This is a great way to kind of build your credit history, especially given that your rent is probably the biggest expense you have on a monthly basis, right? So that it should totally count towards your credit.
What I'm seeing with the students, because there's a lot of noise, is first of all, how to find a property. So no one doesn't want to own the property, especially an international student. And how are you dealing with any of those situations, or helping the students to find a place? Like how are you mitigating those kind of inquiries that come?
I think the international credit check is one big kind of like help, or a big step in the right direction. And I think now we've even gotten the attention of some of the bigger credit bureaus like Equifax and TransUnion that are looking to potentially kind of bring those products, and spread them across the country. So not just for us who are looking at like tenant screening, but also for like if you're applying for your first checking account or a credit card or phone plan, you still need credit to be able to be approved for those things. So I think we're kind of starting to see that movement, which is great. It's actually interconnecting the entire world and kind of like half global credit stream. And an interesting thing about that as well, Brian, is that basically we're seeing a lot of like the developing countries have a bigger hit rate on or coverage of credit data, right? If you look at Mexico, I think 10 years ago, maybe 10% of the population had credit, then it's closer to 60%. And it's going up 5 or 10% every year, right? So it's becoming way more common and way more. So I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see this trend of actually the credit follows you globally, right? And not just on a per country basis. So I think that's a big move in the right direction. I think in terms of like housing approvals, we're going to learn more about that. I think the fact that we've got 1,500 people on the wait list for the tenant passport, it shows that there's a ton of interest.
That's a big demand.
It shows that it's a big pain point that needs to get solved, and I'm hoping we have a really good solution to meet that.
You're probably going to build as it goes, right?
Absolutely. And look, my hypothesis is to say that, look, a lot of folks are coming to Canada. They might actually be very low risk, even compared to like
who's people already here.
Well, exactly. Very similar to the population here. And we'll know the numbers. And by the way, we'll be the first people that actually do this, right? So we'll be able to establish that risk model and build it out. And that's what we're doing is we're taking a bet here to say, hey, let's approve 500 people, 1,000 people. Let's see how it goes for 6 months or a year. Let's get a sense of what the default rate is, 1%, 2%, 4%, 5%. And then whatever that is, we'll price up risk and we'll basically cover it, by kind of passing on the fee. What I know for sure is that it's not going to be more than 8 or 10%. So we can get somebody approved by paying 8% of their annual rent, which is 1 month's rent, which is way more affordable than having to pay 12 months upfront to your landlord, right? So that's the value add. That's the power of like pooling risk and bringing in the law of big numbers by being able to actually, basically kind of like bringing together thousands of leases.
Absolutely.
And spreading their risk and condensing it. Yeah.
So these 1,500 clients who's on the waiting list, are they already in Canada or they're in the process of coming to Canada?
It's a mix. I think, given that we've had that website up for about 6 months now, some folks probably were, coming to Canada.
And they already put on the waiting list.
Here.
Okay.
So I don't expect all of them to sign up for this product.
Okay.
But it's a mix, right? So, a lot of folks start actually looking for housing before they even get here, which makes sense.
Housing is the biggest challenge.
Well, exactly, right? Plus also, where are you going to stay, right? So unless you have somebody to kind of, to stay with for the first few weeks or months to then start to help you look, that's great. Not everybody has a luxury. So some folks actually typically hire realtors or start looking for ways to actually sign a lease before they even get here. And with our international credit check and our tenant passport, you can show up to a listing and say, hey, I've got this person. They're coming from this country. Here's their credit score. Here's their employment history. And here's a guarantor, SingleKey. So if they don't pay, SingleKey pays it. If they damage your property, SingleKey covers it. So as a landlord, now you have no risk saying yes to that tenant and makes it way easier for them to get approved. That's the idea.
Perfect. So, I work with a lot of real estate agents. That's majority of my business come from. Can you kind of let them know how you, SingleKey, can help them to find a solution for the landlords and the tenants?
Yeah. First of all, I want to say thanks to everybody that came by our booth last month at the Realtor Quest show. We had the most popular booth at the show. We had lineups up there, which I was very happy about. But I think we're getting a lot of traction in the realtor community. And we've done a lot to actually engage the realtor community. So first of all, we are a NAR company. The National Association of Realtors is a shareholder in SingleKey, which is great. We're part of the Canada Reach program to connect us and bring us to all these conferences and put us in front of realtors. And I think we're about to launch to announce the deal with Oria as well to become a trusted vendor or partner.
Okay. Congratulations.
Thank you. And the reason for all this is because a lot of realtors see us as basically kind of a support system.
Support system, exactly.
Exactly. Their job is, hey, let me help you, buy a rental property as part of my service and value add to you. I'll help you find a renter and put him there.
And you're not competing with them either.
No. And I mean, as a realtor, right? I'll find you a renter, put him there. What I don't want to do now is get calls to say, hey, the guy you brought my property, stop paying the rent.
Yeah.
You don't want that headache. You want to move on to the next deal. But that's where we come in. So say, as soon as you place that renter, you check with us, you get them approved, you put them on the rent guarantee program, then we take care of it. We collect the rent. We make sure he gets paid. If he doesn't get paid, we deal with it. So we can take that headache away from the realtor and allow you to move on to the next deal, as opposed to, constantly
You're taking a lot of process away from,
which nobody wants to do, right? And we're well set up to kind of deal with those issues because we have a team and process in place. But as a realtor, you want to just basically find a tenant, place them, and move on.
Move on to the next client. I think that tenant passport is also going to be very much added value to the realtors to earn the trust from the client since the day one.
100%.
by bringing them to you guys.
And it's a great way to differentiate yourself as a realtor. If you're using all these latest and greatest tools that nobody else has access to, it's a great way to
Instead of paying up 12 months rent upfront, you're coming new to Canada. And these are the clients they're going to be end up in doing the transaction, buying a house in the very near future with the realtor. So you guys are really adding value to the real estate agents as well.
Yeah, of course. And there's a reason why, all the banks, everybody's really kind of focused on
New to Canada.
because they're starting from scratch, right? They need all the services, all the products, they need a home. So they're
You're building the trust with them.
Exactly.
You want to add anything else to the...
I think we're in an interesting time. It is, as in the rental market, right? Where I think we're hopefully starting to move towards greater affordability. But I would say, look, if you look at what's happening kind of around the world, not just in Canada or just in Ontario, but in the US, and COVID, I think was an accelerator for this as well.
Yeah.
I think there's, it's becoming harder for the small guy to make ends meet and to cover their expenses and to deal with affordability issues, and life's getting expensive. So we're seeing a lot of, governments and municipalities taking steps to protect the renter, which I think is the right thing to do. The problem is that by making it more difficult to get them out or to go through that legal process and to deal with these issues, it puts a lot more risk on the landlord and housing providers. And what we don't want to do is to discourage housing providers from coming in and adding rental units at the market. We want to
that's going to become a bigger problem down the road.
It's going to become a bigger problem down the road. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're here to basically kind of like provide that security and take away the risk that they're to deal with these
challenges. Give them a confidence to go ahead and buy more units.
Exactly, right? To enable them to basically kind of take on more risk, bring more units to market. If they have an empty home, or hey, if your kids left and you have an empty suite in your home, feel confident renting that out, even if you don't have any experience, because we do need that rental supply to be added to the market. And we're hoping we can give you the confidence and the training wheel to be able to do that.
So, Viler, you want to let the guests know how they can get hold of SingleKey?
Yes, you can reach out to us at info@singlekey.com. You can also go to our website, www.singlekey.com. And there's some great products you can buy directly off the website, like our tenant screening and other products.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.